So it's been a minute, and I've been wanting to talk a little bit about a big hobby of mine that I've been in and out of ever since high school, and that is Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I want to start off by saying that this is something that, like, you either are all in on, or it's something that you're just like, meh. Like, I don't really feel like there is, like, an in-betweener. Like, you really are into it, or it's just something you do to kill, like, an evening or something like that. And the reason I wanted to talk about it was because I kind of wanted to give my backstory with it and kind of explain why I like it and why I think it could be a really good hobby for other people. First of all, let me just say this. I got into it back in high school. Yes, I was that guy. There was a club. It was an unofficial club, but it was still a club nonetheless that needed an adult, like, monitor or chaperone, I guess, which was basically just some woman who was willing to dedicate a couple hours of her time just to make sure that there was no fighting or no one was doing drugs or having sex. I forgot the poor woman's name. I really should figure out who she is, because she put up with a lot of really dumb nonsense. I mean, and the group we had was very tame, but, like, you get a bunch of nerds in one room together, just start spouting off all kinds of crazy stuff, and you just feel bad for anyone that's just, like, there on standby, and you're like, I am so sorry you had to hear all of that just mind-numbing nonsense. But she was a sweetheart, and I should look her up and be like, thank you for dealing with all of our nerdy shenanigans. But anyway, I did that in high school, and it catapulted from there. So I did that, I think it was once or twice a week after school, and did it until about 3:30 or 4:30. And from there, once I graduated, I found a group who were, like, you know, we weren't in school anymore. We had the freedom to pretty much get together when we wanted. Looking back on it now, don't take those times for granted if you're still in that age. You know, when you're young and you have all that time in the world, cherish all of that time that you spend. Because once you get older and you have a family and, you know, responsibilities and a full-time job, you're gonna wonder what happened. And so I had a dedicated group of friends, and we would get together and play. God, I don't even know how many times a week. Like, there would be weeks where we would easily get together 2 or 3 times a week. No issue with that at all. There would be times where we had nothing to do, and we would just text each other, be like, hey, you want to get together? Like, you want to get together and run a session tonight? Yeah, sure, let's get together. And that was when, like, I started learning more about, like, the core game itself, and kind of slowly branching out and exploring some new classes and new races. And I think that, honestly, is the best way to experience D&D. I've been to a couple of beginners sessions where there will be a set person who works at, like, a local comic shop, or maybe it's someone who's volunteering their time, who will sit people down kind of like they're in school, and he will go through a carefully scripted and designed campaign, a one-shot, maybe something a little longer depending on who's running it, but enough for people to get a general idea of what the game is and how to play. And while I appreciate things like that, and I would never speak out against anyone who does things like that, I will say that the biggest problem, me personally, I had with something like that was that it felt way too scripted. And when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, this should be something that you, coming into it, should be able to experience and play on your own. It should be a growing experience. Me personally, I was one of those people when in school, I learned best from, like, watching things getting done. Like, that's why I struggled a lot in other classes, because I was someone who needed to see the work done in order to truly understand how to do it. And a lot of us are just mentally built like that. Like, we need to see the work done. I can't just hear someone tell me how to do it and then boom, it's done. It's very, you know, how do I want to put this? It's very not me. I don't know how you would call that. I'm very much someone who needs to see it, because like, just hearing directions sometimes just isn't enough. And as an adult, I've gotten better, but I'm still the kind of person where I'm like, show me how to do this one thing and I'll be good. Because the people, you know, and I think I'll speak for a lot of people when I say this, like, how often do we get like directions when we're driving and we get lost because we don't know where we're going. We're not seeing it. That's why things like, you know, Google Maps is very valuable, because you see where you're going. Anyway, I'm just saying, that's how I can learn. And when these very constructed sessions for people who are getting into it, it's really cool and I like it. However, you will get people like that in various groups who are very by the book and robotic, and understand that that's just how people play. So how do I sum this up for the person who has never played, who wants to know more about it? Well, I'll put it to you like this. If you've ever played video games, this is basically a real-life RPG in which you create a character of their race, their gender, what kind of class they're going to be, like, you know, and I hate using Skyrim as an example. Like, the Baldur's Gate games, I feel like, are a little bit more apt to this, or the Diablo series is really good. You know, you're going to be a fighter, are you going to be a wizard? Are you going to be a cleric? Are you going to be a druid? Things like that. And it's things like that where I feel like the personality of someone can really come out. I've often found that people who are very reserved, like, they often love to gravitate towards classes that have amazing support function. Like, the quieter people really like to take, you know, the druids and the clerics. And it turns out that without them, like, we wouldn't be successfully completing like 90% of our tasks. It's really helpful. And then I usually discover that, like, the people who are like the loudest, who have like the more bigger personalities, they're the ones who are like, they're your barbarians, those are your bards, those are your very outlandish classes. And I feel like they are the flavor of the group, meaning like they're almost like the energy, like the excitement, the hype. And I feel like you need a combination of those two things in order to make like the perfect group. You need the people who are really like honed in, but you also need the people who can like get into their character. Now, with all that said, the game itself, yes, you're reading through, you could read through one book and you can get everything you need, but either a book or a series of books that explain to you about these character races and what benefits they have. Like, if you're a dwarf, I believe you used to have a penalty on your dexterity because you're short and stocky and you can't move around as fast. However, you have really good, you have a good bonus to your constitution because, you know, you live a long time, and you're just physically, you're prepared to handle like life and the elements a little bit more. And then you got OP races like the Dragonborn, which have natural defenses to things that otherwise more humanistic characters wouldn't have. And it's a learning growth thing. You know, you start off as like maybe a human fighter, and then, you know, you go from there and you want to be like a half orc paladin, and then before you know it, you're like a drow evil paladin. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. But then you decide what kind of weapons you want to carry, what skills you're going to use in game. And the guy running the campaign, the DM, the dungeon master, it's up to him to craft the world around you. He's the one that's going to come up with the missions that you're going to go on. He's the one that's going to craft possibly a huge story around all these different stories and missions that you're completing. And you're basically living it out in real time. And along the way you fight creatures in which you're rolling dice, and that depends entirely on what you're doing. And the end of itself, it's all just this wonderful, amazing experience in which you're basically living out an adventure that otherwise you would never, ever get a chance to do. And because it's not in a video game and with other people, you can, like, vibe off them as well. And it just translates to a really fun, good time where you get to meet some really cool people. And otherwise, just, you know, game in a way that otherwise you don't get from just, like, sitting down and playing like a couch solo player game or online. It's very different, and because you're around other people, it's the added benefit of just being sociable and being able to enjoy this with other people as well. Like, there is like a little bond there. Now, let's talk about the negatives that come with it, because there are negatives, and I can do a whole video talking about the negatives, which is something I might do. One of the negatives is that you're going to get people on the complete opposite ends of this spectrum. You're going to get people who just 100% are way too into it, to the point where it's almost like they're just trying. It's almost like they're in a play, and nobody told them that this is like the community rec center play, and they're not going for the Oscar. You know, you're going to get people who just really take this kind of thing a little too seriously, and after a while, people are just going to start looking at you weird, like, okay, you can tone it down. Like, you can be in character and it can still be cheesy, but, like, you got those people who like, maybe took theater, or who are really into acting, or just very animated as a person, who can just be a little much. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, and I will argue that if I had to choose between the two, I think I might not want to deal with this one more. It's the people who don't put any emotion into what they're doing. Like, these are the people who just show up because maybe you asked them as like a favor because you needed a 4-person group, or they were invited by a friend, and maybe the first time they played, or the first couple of sessions they played, they were into it. But then you got these people who are just kind of like sitting there deadpanning, you know, at the wall or at their phone, and who are just literally giving you nothing. It's literally just a beat by beat process in which they're literally doing nothing, contributing nothing, saying nothing, and they're just there. And the reason why I dislike that the most is because we've all been there, like at a family gathering or a gathering with friends, where you could all be having a good time, and there'll always be that one person who just completely sucks the life force out of the entire room because they're not interested, or they don't care. And that really bothers me, because that right there just, to me, is disrespectful, because the person running the campaign, like, they take time out of their personal life to write all of this stuff out and prepare for when you guys get together. They're the ones that go and print these, like, one-shot games for you to play. They're the ones that sit there and write for hours or maybe even days for campaigns. They're the ones that go through all the trouble of getting, like, the table maps and the minis and all the extra dice and all, like, the little things. And when you put someone in that group who basically is just 100% uninterested in what's going on, it really just brings down the energy, and eventually, you know, one person's not going to want to, hold on 1 second. Put my window up. You're going to get people who, you know, it's going to bring down the energy, and then eventually people are just going to be like, well, if you're not going to try, why am I going to try? And then nothing sucks more than when you get everyone together to play, and, like, there's one person who's just bringing down the morale. Maybe they're just having a bad day, and they can't, like, put that aside and deal with it when they get home for the sake of, you know, the rest of the group. And other people are going to see it, and they're like, oh, well, if he's not having fun, well, then, you know, and it's affecting the group, then, well, I'm not going to have fun. You know, that kind of thing sucks. So you got those. You got the biggest stressor, especially as you get older, is finding time to play. That's the big one. That was the big lesson I had to learn with board gaming. For everyone that loves to go out and spend tons of money on like the books and the dice and everything that comes with it, understand that you are not going to be playing every single day. And even when you do play, you're maybe not going to be playing all that long. Like when I first started, like once I got out of high school, like it was common that at least one night a week, we would be having games running till almost 6 a.m. That was a common thing. Now I'm a part of a couple of local gaming groups, and they're lucky if they get together once for like a few hours every couple of weeks. So finding the time is a big one. It's a bummer. Again, we're all adults. You know, we all have families. We all have responsibilities. We all have our jobs. And it's not that easy to just come up with all that free time. And it used to be, you know, like who needs sleep? But nowadays it's like, oh, well, I can only get together and play D&D until about 10 o'clock because I have to get up for work at 6 a.m. And it's like when we were like, you know, just finishing up high school, it's like no, we could game till like 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't gotta be to work until 8 o'clock. It's fine. I only need about 4 or 5 hours. It's cool. I'll just grab a monster on the way in. It's fine. And nowadays you realize just how precious your sleep is. And yeah, that's another one too, another big one that I think a lot of people overlook. Another negative that comes with it is and this is just like all in-game minor things, but it's like, again, there's a little bit of a spectrum here. You got the people who, don't know enough about their character, and who don't learn enough about what character they have built, and so basically you're kind of playing the game for them. Now, I'm not saying, like, this isn't the person that just isn't putting anything into their character and they don't care. This is someone who basically, like, asked to play and is just not putting the work in to, like, learn on their own. You know what I mean? I had that happen where my friend would constantly make characters for his girlfriend to play, and she would get together and play, but like she never like retained any of the information. And it got to the point where like a couple of us were like, he's been doing this for you for like 2 or 3 years and you still haven't learned how to play. And it got really frustrating. And then you got the other end of that spectrum, of which this is the guy who knows everything. You can't tell him anything new because he already knows. And what's really frustrating is that this is not normally the dungeon master. This is usually the guy who's playing who went out of their way to find this really obscure race and class. And then like mid-game, like let's say they step into a trap and you're like, oh, okay, I need you to do like a dexterity save to see if you get out of the way of what's going to happen. And they're like, well, I don't need to because I have that feat that allows me to do that, and I have that ability that allows me to do that. And I just look at them and I'm like, yes, you can do these. However, you as the character don't know what you're walking into. Therefore, you can't speak on behalf of you playing the character now. So, like there's a meta that needs to be respected that's never respected. But apparently, like, and again, these people just claim they know everything. I could do a whole video about this one guy I used to campaign with. Love him to death, but he used to just drive everyone nuts with that. Like, you cannot tell him anything. And that's annoying because they are just the people who think that if they stock up on as many free things as they can and get the most obscure races or classes or items that can do all kinds of crazy stuff, that eventually they're on God mode. And to which I say to that, how is the game then fun if it becomes next to impossible for me to like stop you? Me as the DM, I'm setting up monsters and challenges and dungeons and puzzles for you to solve. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than that one guy who needs to make their character so OP that now as the DM, I now have to raise the challenge rating on the behalf of the whole group because of this one person. And so that's a negative. Now, I don't say these things to deter anyone from playing, but I do say them because it is a real thing. It does happen. People do take this very seriously, and I'm just saying there needs to be like a nice happy medium where people can just get in there and play and learn and just develop a nice middle ground of how they want to go about it. And just like with anything else in the world, you're going to have your people on your varying extremes that can either, that could hinder your experience, or they could potentially make it better. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's a game I could easily recommend to anyone who wants to look into it. It's very simple. Look for the various new D&D playing guides. There's also different other books, a series to play with, like Pathfinder, and then there's a space one, I believe it's called Starfinder. You can get digital copies of these books fairly easily, and I'd say give it a shot for yourself. Look into it, ask questions. Playing online now has been more easier than it ever has been before, so you have that added opportunity. And altogether, it's one of those things that I haven't played much lately, but it's one of those things where the more I think about it, the more I just kind of fall back in love with what it was and what it offered. And I wish I can go back to when I was first learning 3.5 and just be able to, share that with everyone once again. So, yeah, maybe next time we'll have a little fun talking about the character, the people who definitely make the campaign experience a little more interesting. We will see. And I will see you next time.